I'm Rafael, the Wealthy Expat, the citizenship by investment and by exception guy here on YouTube. I recently had somebody approach me here from the YouTube channel saying that he got a St. Kitts and Nevis passport for $250,000 US. This particular person is an American citizen, doesn't have any other citizenship, wanted to have more freedom away from the United States to be able to access banking infrastructure in a better way. The banks that he wanted to access didn't let him on a US passport. He also wanted better access to some business deals as well, because a lot of people just won't do business with Americans outside of the United States because they know the requirements and the regulations and the extra taxation required in order to add on an American partner. In order to get rid of all of this while still maintaining compliance with US taxes and US reporting and everything, but still getting the access to the bank accounts, to the crypto exchanges, to the businesses, he got a St. Kitts passport, just like me. I spent $150,000 back when it was way cheaper. This person spent $250,000. And he realized that as a St. Kitts citizen, or in general, a citizen of the Caribbean, or in general, a citizen of citizenship by investment countries, it really doesn't make that much difference in terms of how you are perceived around the world, specifically by institutions like banks. Some crypto exchanges will see you as different, but they will always see you as an American. Specifically, if on your passport, on your St. Kitts or Antiguan or Grenadian passport, it says that you were born in the United States. A lot of banks have an automatic flash, an automatic red flag, if somebody comes in with a passport from St. Kitts and Nevis, for example, born in the United States, or that is also a U.S. citizen, because by law, you have to tell these institutions that you are a U.S. citizen. You can't just pretend that you're not from the U.S. Specifically, if you were born from the U.S., you would be committing perjury in many cases by not revealing your U.S. passport. And in many residency applications and pretty much anything you do around the world, you have to declare that you're a U.S. citizen. And that actually cut him off from a lot of these deals. It cut him off from a lot of these banks, even with a second nationality. And I want to highlight one thing, that citizenship by investment, specifically, these programs are marketed a lot towards Americans and Westerners as a way to essentially bypass regulation, bypass taxes, bypass banks, bypass all these institutions, just pretending that you're not a U.S. citizen or pretending that you're not a Western citizen anymore. Everything applies to you, even with a St. Kitts, even with a Caribbean passport. And I have one. And that's why I want to warn you, and that's why I want to tell you, I love St. Kitts passports. I love the Caribbean. You can get citizenship by investment in around a year. You get a second passport. You can travel on that. You can potentially renounce your U.S. citizenship. But it doesn't provide much value apart from just buying the passport. Obviously, you can go and live in St. Kitts and Nevis. You can go and live in Antigua. You can live anywhere in all these countries in the Caribbean, or not anywhere in the Caribbean, but specifically in these countries you can go and live in. If you're not an American, you can potentially pay 0% capital gains tax, 0% personal income, 0% everything tax, and crypto specifically. But as long as you still have ties to your origin country, it really doesn't do that much. You don't have a country where you can actually get records and get a birth certificate. For example, a lot of countries, obviously you were born in one place and you're always going to have a birth certificate from that country. But a lot of places issue a foreign birth certificate, a local birth certificate for a person born outside of that country. Let's say you naturalize in a country, or you get citizenship by exception, for example. That's why I talk about there are better ways of getting citizenship than just traditional citizenship by investment. There are better ways of getting citizenship by exception, citizenship by merit. Obviously, the requirements are much higher, and it's a discretionary process, case by case. You need to have a clean record. You need to have a public profile. You need to be able to show your contributions to that country. But in many cases, you will be issued a birth certificate for a person born abroad that naturalized by exception or by presidential decree, and that can then be used to apply for other programs. So you're not constantly having to get the record apostille in the United States, which takes a long time. A lot of states take months in some cases to get it apostille. In some cases, they will accept a criminal record certificate from that new country of citizenship. You will be able to better access some banks, better access some crypto exchanges, because they specifically know that you didn't just buy that passport. You had to go through some other program that isn't specifically citizenship by investment or direct, a transactional nature to it, you didn't go through one of these processes. You went through a much more case-by-case, much less publicized process. That is why I think that for specifically a lot of Americans, take advantage of being American. Take advantage of the perception of the United States, although a lot of countries now hate the United States and it's going downhill. Take that perception, take that historical image of the United States and use it to get other citizenships around the world. That's exactly what I did to get citizenship by exception before I renounced my US citizenship. If you're interested in getting a second citizenship, I made a private video for my email list on exactly how citizenship by merit works, how you can get a second passport in a couple of months that might be significantly better than, for example, a Caribbean citizenship by investment. All you have to do, put your email in the link below. I'm not going to spam you. I'm not going to send you 100 emails. I'm not going to try to pitch you anything. This is just so you understand how this industry works, how you understand how these countries are bidding for millionaires. Click the link. I'll see you there. One thing that I also tell clients from the US, from the European Union, for example, is that these citizenships are, to an extent, slaves of whatever the EU, whatever the US dictate. Because, for example, the US wanted to put St. Kitts and all these other Caribbean citizenship by investment programs in a blacklist, in a travel ban. I said Grenada because Grenada does have an E2 treaty, although you can't get an E2 visa without actually living 3 years in Grenada. But if, let's say you want to get citizenship by investment, and at some point you want to go to the United States, and let's say you want to live 3 years in Grenada, although I think that's too much hassle for somebody that has a lot of money. I'd rather you just get a visa directly or get some other citizenship or get a citizenship in the European Union, for example, that has access to the United States. There are better routes, but you're not in the travel ban, at least for now. These countries quickly panicked and added new regulations, new due diligence, interviews. When the EU pushes them, they constantly have to add new regulations. Now they're thinking of adding a 30-day residency requirement. So the more US and EU push these countries, the more they change their laws because they care about access to those countries. And what I think, in my opinion, it's better to have other countries that not necessarily care that much about what the EU, what the US say. Yes, obviously, there's diplomatic relations. Yes, obviously, they want to maintain that Schengen access. For example, countries that are candidates to join the European Union, they have to comply with a lot of laws, but they're not slaves to whatever the EU says. And in my opinion, Caribbean citizenship by investment programs have to really do whatever the EU says because they have to keep that access in order to keep the amount of sales that they're getting. That's why some people recommend, for example, Turkish citizenship by investment because they don't have access to Schengen anyway, so they can kind of do whatever they want, or Vanuatu, all these programs. I think there's much better programs than those, like citizenship by exception programs, that are not necessarily following exactly what the EU tells them, and you have much better access because they're not a publicized transactional citizenship by investment program. And therefore, you can access better banks. If you access a crypto exchange, for example, they don't think that you bought that passport to bypass KYC or to bypass any of this because you can't bypass it anyway. As a US citizen, you by law have to comply or commit perjury. So obviously, you either comply or you're a criminal, essentially. That's how the US makes it. You always have to report that you're a US citizen. And if you're living in a high-tax country, let's say that's the UK, and you go and open an account somewhere else, you have to declare that you're a UK tax resident for CRS purposes, for reporting back to the UK. So anyway, you have to declare that you have ties to your new country. So in my opinion, the best way to create a perfect plan B for a millionaire is to get a citizenship. You can add citizenship by investment into that portfolio. I did that. I got a St. Kitts passport. I recommend a lot of people get this. But on top of that, for example, I was talking to another client from the US, got an Antiguan citizenship, so now has US and Antigua, has residency in a Latin American country, and is potentially also getting another citizenship, and is also working towards citizenship by descent, because that particular client, by descent, multiple generations, but it was from somewhere in the European Union. Her descendants were from the European Union, therefore she can get that EU passport to then have access back to the United States in case she wants to renounce the US citizenship. So also playing in different points of the world and different programs, you can take advantage of them and include one of these into your portfolio. Although I think for a lot of people, it doesn't make that much sense. Now, one thing I will say here is that there are some countries that truly don't care. They don't give an S what citizenship you have, as long as you get visa-free travel, as long as you're not a sanctioned individual, as long as you don't have a criminal record. For example, Singapore, I've traveled on all my passports to Singapore No questions asked on any of them. Sometimes they ask how long you're staying, sometimes they ask where you're staying, and so on, but it's not like interrogation, why are you here on this citizenship? Because they truly don't care. You don't need a visa, you're not a criminal, come right in. Just leave before your visa time ends. And there are a lot of countries that are like that they truly don't care where you come from, as long as that country has treaties, as long as that country is a legitimate country on a world stage, isn't sanctioned, anything like that. So for a lot of countries, it still matters, but I still think the perception of these passports is going downhill over time, and there are better options. If you still want to get a Caribbean passport, you definitely want to check out this video right here on how to pick the best one and what I recommend when it comes to getting Caribbean citizenship by investment program. Don't make the mistakes that I made. Check it out right here.